I am an artist. I am an art instructor. I'm a mom. My name is Niarus Walker. I hate to be cliche, but I was born an artist. I have other members of my family who are very artistic, and even one of them who was self-taught, and he taught himself to paint portraits, old master style, and is really very good. And he teaches art today. And and I know this is my interview, but I'm just trying to give you a little connection. I have another cousin who works for Image Comics, and he now works, I think he has his own company called Pandora. So it's in my family. Both of my siblings and I had another brother who were really good at making art. They did not go that direction. I happen to really love it for what it does for me. I just always made art, just always. I remember though, I used to watch public television and copy some of the techniques that they did there. And so I wouldn't say I'm self-taught. I really discovered my love for art in the 7th grade though. I had a teacher, I think her name was Miss Malakan, and I drew a face there, and I was like, oh wow, I could do this. I love doing this. I like the magic of it. So yeah, I would say 7th grade was my formative moment when I decided I want to be an artist. I was about 12, yeah. So it took me a little bit of time, but I realized that what I do with my art is that I share experiences that others may resonate with and or may not resonate with. It might be an experience I have that others may have, and in sharing it through the visual medium, they get to kind of own that experience as well. But before that, and even now, I make art because I need to make it. Like when I don't make art, I am a cranky human being. Nothing else gives me the feeling of accomplishment than when I'm making art. I mean, I like teaching and I enjoy that, but I have to make my own art. I can cook and clean and wash and sew, and I could probably save a human being's life, and I'd probably not as fulfilled as when I make a work of art. I feel like that's how I feel. I'm exaggerating about the life, but you know. So currently, over my career, I've done a lot of different things. I started with the generic, landscape, watercolor works, just doing mimetic work, that is observational work, drawing things from from life. And after a while, I wanted to move beyond that. After a while, it kind of gets boring just to draw the beach and the coconut trees, or to just drawing the landscape around. It got kind of boring. I wanted to do something deeper than that. And then I had got pregnant, and I didn't want to paint because I use oils a lot. I didn't want to paint while I was pregnant, so I stopped painting for a while, and I dedicated about 6 years of my life to just bringing up my daughter. And I said, when she's 6, I will start painting again. But by the time she was 2, I had another daughter. But I maintained that promise to myself. So when the oldest was 6, I started painting again, but I didn't want to go back to the same way that I was working before. However, I like still life. I used to do still lifes as well. I did everything, figurative work, animal work, still lifes. And I did also, I would in watercolors and oils. So because as an art teacher, I do get to dabble in a lot of the media, so I'm pretty adept at most of them. And I decided I really wanted to change my style, change the way I look at art, change the reason I was making art outside of the fact that I love making it, and to communicate something a little bit more clearly. And the still life, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not a historian, but this is where I got my inspirations from Memento Mori. And that's a type of still life that was made in the 15th century, where they exhibited, when I say exhibited, they drew and painted objects from life. But basically the premise of that was life is fleeting and life is short. And so they would put things like bubbles and flames and maybe little dead critters like flies, or there would be shells. It's like, oh, it's very symbolic, very highly symbolic, but it was these objects. And the reason also I like still lives is they stay there for you, and you can just, they don't move unless somebody messes with it. And so you can paint it forever and ever and look at it. And I don't really like painting from photographs. And painting a plein air, the wind, the bugs, the rain, things shift, the light. So that's another challenge. So still lives are really good for honing your craft, because it's one thing, you can control your lighting. But I like the memento mori. I like the story. I like the story behind it. I like this idea of the transience of life and how life is fleeting, and I like the symbolism in it. So I also like the way they use light and shadow to create form. That's one of my favorite things to do when making art. Technically, when I make art, I like to deal with light and shadow. I really like to create form, and so I stay kind of realistic. But what I did was I broke up the form, the idea of the still life, which is like set in a particular way, and you have one perspective and you do that. So what I did, and I think I'm influenced by a lot of things, making collage, cubism, things like that. So what I did was deconstructed the still life in this work. This is an example of what I would call a deconstructed still life, where instead of having everything set up in one area and you're doing it from one perspective, I took individual pieces and I placed them around and I paint them at different times of the day, so that you might look at it and see the light might be different on one piece than another. So it's sort of like a little disconcerting, but the symbolism is still there. I have the skull that represents death. I have the smoke that's whispery and disappearing. I will have flowers, or like I have cotton in there. And the cotton is more, so I'm bringing it home, right? The cotton here, a lot of times you'll see people represent the cane as being on St. Croix, but I find that we have a lot of cotton, and we did grow cotton here, and I find them very beautiful, but they're really thorny as well. So there's that for me, and cotton is very delicate. It comes out, it's beautiful, and as soon as the rain hits it, it's done. So it feels like the right flower, if you will, for this type of work for me, to make it more Caribbean related, to make it more Black related, because a lot of that also has to do with the whole concept of the slave trade. A lot of the things that we have, a lot of the things that not just us, but not us especially, but a lot of things that they acquired through the slave trade, right? And so, again, going back to the memento mori, and a more out of that came out the vanitas, right? So the vanitas is based on the idea of this verse in Ecclesiastes that says, "Vanity of vanity, all is vanity." Like, why are you gathering all of these things? What are you going to do with all of these things when you die? They're not going to go with you. We know that from the Egyptians. It does not go with you. So the whole idea is it's vanity to acquire all of these objects that enslave us too, because we have these things, and you want to travel and you go somewhere, you got to pack all this stuff and take it with you. Or if something breaks and you lose your mind, you love this thing so much. And so that's sort of, I'm exploring all of those ideas within this type of work. It really shows that I can create form, that I know how to use light, that I can use color. These are the things that are important to me. And this is the kind of work that I want to do. So that is why I chose this piece. I think it's a good example of my ability to create realism. So the work behind me is called The Games They Play. It originated out of actually an experience I had during the centennial, when just a thought came to my mind of, what if they decided to sell the Virgin Islands again? Would we actually have a say in that? Do we have enough ownership of this territory that we could actually say, no, you cannot sell this territory? Would we be sold with the territory? So I had a real visceral reaction to this. And I thought about the people who were here when the Danes sold it to America. And they did not have an identity for 20 years. They weren't Danes, they weren't, US citizens. 20 years or so. And I thought the same. I thought, oh my God, what's gonna. So the thought of like these people playing games up till this day. And so these dead men who made all these rules and decided to do this, it's still affecting us even today. Like the trauma of this is affecting me, even if I do not have ancestral history in the Virgin Islands. But this is my home, right? This is where I grew up most of my life, more than half of my life. And so I did this series called, actually I did 4 pieces called Dead Men Playing Games. And this one was a continuation of that, called The Games They Play. So in the first iteration, it didn't look like this. It was a whole other kind of expression. And I used chess pieces, and I applied these little chess pieces. I felt like a pawn. I literally felt like a pawn when this feeling came upon me. And that is where that came from. Like I just could be at the mercy of the king or the queen. I could be, taken or killed or moved or whatever. So I made that piece. And this piece came out of a second iteration of that idea of the dead men playing games, and I call it The Games They Play. So the chess pieces obviously is a game, and people thinking ahead of moves and what move you make today affecting you, 10, 15 years later, those kinds of things. So this work, the way I'm working, this style of work for me is it's a deconstructed still life, and it is derived from the vanitas, which is a type of work that deals with the transience of life and how things in life are passing. So the skull represents death, and the delicateness of the cotton and the smoke. These are things that are whispery and they pass. Time is something that goes and passes. It's not things you can hold on to. So that's what most of those things are in there. They're symbols that would exist in a vanitas. The vanitas is a type of still life. And still lives are things that objects you arrange into a form, and you shed light on it and you paint it. But I wanted to do something more deconstructed, a little bit more modern than the typical vanitas might look like. The vanitas generally is a very dark lighting and kind of moody. But I didn't really want to go with that. I just like the symbolism of it, and I wanted to modernize it a little bit. I always go to this verse of in the scriptures that say a prophet is not without honor except in his own country. That's because Jesus was like dishonored in his own country. Didn't recognize his mastery. And I think it feels really good. It feels good to be considered in the company of people like we're in the company of in this show. And I'm really grateful to be and honored to be part of Masterclass. Discipline. You have to be disciplined, because there are times when you don't, even if I love painting, I like what it does for me, there are times when I don't feel like going in the studio. And it works 2 ways though, because if you don't feel like doing it and you go and do it, you could really mash up your work. It has happened to me. And there are times when you just go and then it happens and it flows. And there are times when you want to go and you cannot go for other reasons. Yes, it's just a discipline of showing up. Yeah. I will add to this, and I don't know if you can cut this out, but because I am a teacher, I spend most of my days in the classroom, 8 hours plus in the classroom. And outside the classroom, you're still preparing for teaching, gathering materials, preparing your lessons and all of that. And a lot of my ideas happen in the classroom. But I did not want my art career to fall, my personal art career to fall by the wayside because I was a teacher. And I also felt that teaching has informed my art making, but my art making helps me with my teaching as well. I have to solve the problems that I'm asking the students to solve. I have to know that it's solvable before I can give them the problem. So they are kind of intertwined, and I did not want to, I was just telling them, I wanted to keep my toe in the water until I can jump in fully, because teaching takes quite a bit of time. That you're good, that you're really a good artist, and you should really pursue it directly and in what's the word? Intentionally. Yeah, that's what I would have told myself.
Why?
because for a long time I did not think I was an artist or a good artist, good enough artist. As a matter of fact, I went to school to study fashion design because I didn't think I was good enough. But I didn't like sewing and I didn't like the fashion world. And I liked making art, painting and drawing and sculpting. So, but I also didn't take it, like I didn't take it seriously. I didn't think it was important. I did it for me.